This video is going to quickly show you what to do in Excel to get the values needed to draw a box plot by hand on graph paper or regular paper if you use a ruler. These are the quantities that we went over in class so that you can, that you're going to need to calculate. So in order to do this, I went ahead and typed the first, second, and third quartile, the inner quartile range, the lower limit, the upper limit, the lower adjacent, the upper adjacent, and then outliers. And in outliers, we would probably just list them. So what I'm going to do is just make sure you're clear on a couple little things as we go. I can put a whole box around this. I go up in the Home tab over to what looks like a window pane and to drop down, and I'm just going to choose outside border, and you can choose something different. I'm going to come in here to Q1 and I'm going to use the function equals quartile inc. And I'm going to use my arrow keys on my keyboard to select it and then my tab key to select the function further. So now I've selected the function and it's waiting for an array of data. So all I'm going to do while that's giving me that blinking vertical black line is I'm going to take my mouse, come over to where my values are, and hold down my left mouse key as I drag down to select these values of data. Then I'm going to put a comma, and as I showed you in class, I need to put the quartile. So I'm going to put a 1 for the first quartile. Notice that when I typed the 1, Excel gave me this little box to tell me what are my options of what I can put in and what each one means. So it's giving me some nice reminders there. So I'm going to close the parentheses, and that tells Excel I put in everything I meant to put in, and now I hit enter. So I can see that without having to sort, without having to count, without having to do anything, Excel is giving me the first quartile, which is the value where 25% of the values in this list are less than it. Okay, so now I'm going to copy that same function for second quartile and third quartile. And I'm going to do it two different ways. The first way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to copy the formula. And by using this little green box, and I'm going to copy it down. Everything's a relative reference. So this will actually be wrong because if I come up here to where the formula bar is and I click on it, it's going to highlight what was used to go into that calculation. Notice that because I shifted my formula down one row, now my range of numbers has shifted down one row, and I didn't want that. So the one way I can fix this is just by grabbing this box and hovering over it with my mouse until I get a 4-pointed star, and that lets me drag. So I'm going to drag up. So I've already now fixed the first part of the function because now it has the range of values that I need to do the calculations on. The other thing I need to change is I'm going to change this 1 to a 2. Okay, so that's going to give me the second quartile. Now, obviously, the second quartile, 30.5, is not a number in our set of values, and that's okay. It's the average between the two middle values because there's an even number of values here. And if you remember from a previous video, I showed you can get the count. You can select the cells, and down in the bottom right corner of your Excel, it's going to give you the count. So we know there's 20 values in this list that I've selected, and their average is 30.25. So we can see that the median, which is 30.5, is close to the mean of 30.25. That suggests to me that the data it's not skewed very much in either direction. Okay, the third quartile, I can do what I just got done doing, or I can do this a different way, and I could have done this for both of these. I'm just showing you two different ways to do it. Is I can come in here and I can select the range that I don't want it to move when I copy the formula. And on my keyboard, I find function F4, and that automatically adds the dollar signs. And the dollar sign in front of the A means if I change this and copy the formula to any place else, it's always going to say an A. The dollar sign in front of the 4 means it's always going to say a 4. So if I want the cell A4 to A23 frozen, or what's called an absolute reference, so it doesn't change when I copy the formula, I need dollar signs in front of both the A and the 4. And then the colon just is separates the first cell from the end, from the last cell, and so I need dollar signs there as well. Okay, so now that I've changed that, I can copy this formula down now. And I'm going to copy it and paste it. So I'm going to use Command or Control C and then on my keyboard or Control or Command V. I could have also right-clicked and hit copy and then right-clicked and hit paste. That would have worked as well. Now notice this matches. It says 24, and that's because I copied the formula exactly. And I can go up here now and see I do have the correct range of values, but it still says a 1. So now I have to change this to a 3 because I want the third quartile. The other thing I could do if I didn't know what to put there, I can see what my options are, and I can use my arrow keys to get to the one I want. And when I find the one I want, I can hit enter. So now I see, and that is wrong. Oops, my bad. 5, sorry, third quartile. Let's try that again. Use the down arrow keys, and I believe it's tab to select that. Yes, and now I hit enter. Okay, now I have to calculate the interquartile range. So I'm going to say that's going to equal the third quartile. So I say equals, and I use my arrow keys to select it, or I can use my mouse and point to it. And I'm going to subtract from that. Now I'll use my mouse and come up and select the first quartile. So I'm getting the difference between those two functions. I see that it's 11.75. So this is the type of input you want to use on the computer assignment. You can't just write 11.75, you'll get it wrong. I wanted to also remind you that if you click up here on the formula bar, it is going to highlight with different color boxes what you use to get the formula. So it's a great way to check that you really did choose the right cells that you wanted to use in the formula. All right, so now that we have the interquartile range, we can get the lower limit and the upper limit. So in order to get the lower limit, we're going to say it's going to equal the first quartile. So again, go up there, and we're going to subtract 1.5 times, and for times we use the asterisk, the interquartile range. So that's the lower limit. And then for the upper limit, we're going to say that equals the third quartile plus 1.5 times the interquartile range. Okay. So now we've identified the lower and upper limits, and that's going to be what we can use to figure out where our lower and upper adjacent values are. So remember, the lower adjacent value is going to be the minimum number that's not less than the lower limit. That's like the most low we can go. And the upper adjacent value is the upper or maximum value in our data, as long as it doesn't cross the upper limit. So we can do this by sorting the data. So I can come over here. I have this set of data. I can go, notice I could have selected just anywhere in here. And I can go to data and then come over here in the middle to sort. And I'm going to make sure the checkbox says my data has headers. So now it says sort by values, and it defaults to smallest to largest. So all I have to say is okay. All right, so now that it did that, I can go and I can say, okay, what's my lower limit is 6.375. So that means that this 5 is an outlier. So let's go ahead and put 5 in here. So I'm just going to say 5. So we can say equals 5. Actually, let me do that at the front. I'm just going to type in 5. So outliers, we aren't going to point to anything specific because we might have more than one. So for the lower adjusted, I now look for what's the next lowest value, and is it is it not crossing the lower limit? So I see that it's 15. So that works. So I'm going to say equals 15. And to get the upper adjacent value, what we want to do is look for what is the largest value that is not going to cross the upper limit. So we can see that that value is going to be 43. So we can point to that. And, oops, point to that. And then for outliers, we have another value here, 66, that is beyond that upper limit. So we see that we had both a lower outlier and an upper outlier. So in here in the formula bar, I'm going to just come in here and say put a comma and put 66. And that's going to give me this little green triangle because it's trying to tell me, hey, these are numbers, but I don't know how to interpret them except as text, and that's fine because that's how I want them interpreted. You want to format it nicer. I can select it, go to the home screen, and put them in the center, and then that way you can see it that way. So that's it for that. If you wanted to then convert this, you would take this on a piece of paper and follow along like I did in class. If you'd rather have Excel make the box plot for you, it's going to make it vertical instead of horizontal. It's the only way it can do it. But in order to do that, I'm going to select the values that we've been working with, and I'm going to go up to Insert. And in Insert in the middle is Charts. And inside Charts, there's what looks like what's called a scatter plot. And if you click there, I'm sorry, right above it, histogram, you'll come down in the middle is Box and Whisker. So you can click on Box and Whisker, and over here, you can, once you makes your box, you can kind of grab it and drag it, you can resize it. You can click on where it says chart title, and you can say whatever you want to say, maybe box plot of values here, since we don't really know a whole lot about this data. As you can see, we are able to get automatically generated for us the box plot. So it's going from and notice it's going to the value 5. So it's doing it a little different than we were. Let's just change these to excluded. And then we are seeing that our lower adjusted value is 5, so we would get rid of 5 there. So there is not one absolute definite way to do box plots, which I know is probably frustrating for you. Usually, all statisticians would use the quartile.inc. The INC function that I showed you is considered the standard. And you can see Excel is doing something here that's not the standard. But if I switch to the excluded, so what does that mean? It means it's going to figure out the quartiles, excluding the lowest minimum value and the upper maximum value. When it's INC included, it includes all the values. So some people feel that when you get your quartile, you should be looking at the quartiles of the data of just the inside, but that's very rare. So I'm kind of surprised that's what Excel is doing here, but it is. But if I do that, you'll see that my lower and upper limits, and which lead to my lower adjusted values and my upper adjusted value matches what's in the box plot. So that must be the way Excel internally is calculating this. So, but let's go through it again. We go from the lower adjusted value, which is 5. It goes up to the, what looks like a 22. So let's confirm that. Yes, 22. So that is what it's doing. To the median at 30.25, which, oh, that's the, sorry, that is the X is the mean, or 30.25, but the median is on the line at 30.5. And then the third quartile is at the 37.25. The upper adjusted value is at 43, just like we got, and we have the outlier at 66. So you notice that I hovered over to get the actual values. Okay, so that's how you can do a box plot created for you, and that's a very useful thing when you're doing any kind of analysis and you want to quickly figure out if there's any outliers in your data.